Finally, sitting here beside me is Graham Steele, who has been the MLA for Halifax Fairview since 2001. He's been elected 4 times. He has decided not to run in the current provincial election. He was the Minister of Finance for Nova Scotia's first ever NDP government and has been the Minister of Economic and Rural Development and Tourism since June of this year. He's now writing a book about his experience in politics. Graham Steele.
Thanks very much. I want to thank the Spring Tide Collective for inviting us all to be here today. I was actually asked, it's got to be several months ago now, and I actually seriously thought about backing out once the provincial election was called, because I think it's one of the signs of the partisanship of the current political system that I'm afraid that because, as I sit here tonight, I am a minister in a government that is running to be reelected, that anything that I say tonight might be attributed to the Premier, attributed to the government, that if I say anything the least bit interesting, it could become an issue in the election campaign. And so I want to assure you all that I specifically deny that I'm going to say anything relevant or interesting tonight. And we'll see. There's somebody in this room who has an interest in taking what I say and misquoting it and trying to make an election issue out of it. And I guess you can all judge for yourselves if that actually happens. Okay, so by way of background for me, I've been a member of 2 parties in my lifetime. I was once a Liberal.
I knew that.
I've been a member of the Nova Scotia NDP since 1991. I have worked for the NDP caucus office as a staff person. I've been an NDP MLA since 2001, and I've been a cabinet minister in an NDP government since 2009. Now, because I've been working in daily politics for 15 years, 3 as a staffer, 12 as an MLA, I have a really ambivalent view towards political parties. I've seen them at their best. I've seen them at their worst. They're complex institutions in a complex political system. And so I can argue both sides. I can go either way. I can give you examples of how they're great. I can give you examples of how they're terrible. But tonight, especially because I had some idea of where the other panelists might be coming from, I'm going to actually spend most of my time defending political parties. Now, I'm not going to go all the way and say that everything's just fine, because it's not. But I want to talk about the upside of political parties, things that you don't often hear. And the main thing is that political parties give structure and predictability to the political process. And it's just like, now I know, before anybody objects, I'm going to use a sports analogy, and I know politics is not sports. I know that. But still, it's like if you go to a hockey game or a soccer game, and there's no teams, and you just put good players on the ice, and you just go and watch to see what happens. And you know what? There might be some beautiful plays break out once in a while, but just as likely as that, you're going to get people colliding with each other, working at cross purposes. You don't know which goal they're shooting for. At one point, it's that goal, and another time it's that goal, and it's just one big mass of confusion with a few spots of beauty. That's why we don't go to those kind of games. That's why that's not the kind of sports events that we like. Now, let me finish that where I started, which is to say, I know politics is not sports. It's about making good public policy decisions for the people of the province and the people of the country. But I think there's a point there, is that we get more done when we act in teams. And that's why, as long as there have been democracy, like-minded people have gotten together in looser or tighter coalitions, because it's easier to get done the things you want to get done if you form yourself into parties. Now, parties are composed of broadly like-minded people. Not entirely like-minded, of course, but broadly speaking, you join a party because you think you're going to find like-minded people in that party. So naturally, we're going to vote the same way most of the time, because the reason I'm a New Democrat is because I believe that other New Democrats are going to agree with me most of the time. So when I stopped being a Liberal in another province and moved to Nova Scotia, And suddenly the Liberal Party wasn't talking about the issues that mattered to me. The NDP was. And so that's why I joined the NDP, because here in this province, that seemed to be where I was most likely to find people who thought like I did. Now, because of that, I have rarely, in 12 and a half years as an MLA, felt like I have been whipped to vote a way that I didn't want to vote. In fact, in my entire time in the legislature, 12 and a half years, hundreds, maybe thousands of votes, I can recall only 4 times where an MLA voted against their party or voted a different way. And one of them was me, right? But that's a whole other story for another day, because it took years to work up to it, and I felt the consequences of it for years after. And if you want to know the story about that, because most of you probably don't even remember, if you want to know the story, you're going to have to buy my book.
Wow.
By the way, somebody at the front here published a book today.
Yeah.
Stephanie Domet.
Thank you.
It's a novel.
It's my second book.
Yeah. Second novel from Stephanie. And what's it called, Stephanie?
It's called Falsey Downsies, but enough about me. Let's talk more about Parliament.
All right. So why do I think that it's normal and desirable for elected representatives to vote with a party? First of all, most voters, I'm going to say something, this is going to shock you, and there could be a deep intake of breath, but here we go. Most voters are not voting for the individual candidate. Okay? Look, the first time I ran for office, there might have been 6 people in my constituency who knew who I was. Okay? I was a complete and utter unknown non-entity. The reason, but I won with 60% of the vote. Why? Because people just fell in love with me and my winning personality? No. It's because my area, the constituency had been represented by the NDP for a long time. They loved the previous MLAs that they'd had. The previous one, Eileen O'Connell, had just recently passed away. That's why there was a by-election. They loved the work that she did. They loved the work that Alexa McDonough did. Some people liked my party. Some people liked my leader. But the point was almost nobody knew who I was. So when I went to the legislature, I was under no illusion about whether they had voted for me. They had voted for something else. They had voted for, in short, for my party. Now, if I didn't want to be part of a party, I could run as an independent, and I would be crushed, like all independents are in Nova Scotia. In the last 30 years, I can think of exactly 2 people who ran and were elected as independents. And it was in the 1980s, and it was Paul McEwen and Billy Joe McLean.
Federally, Bill Casey.
Right, I'm talking provincially now. So ran and won as independents. And Bill's a good case as well. So these are big, larger-than-life personalities. I'm sure Danny will agree. Paul McEwen, Billy Joe McLean. Great, big, larger-than-life personalities of Nova Scotia politics. And Bill Casey became that as well because of the reason why he left the Conservative caucus. But it's only in those very, very exceptional cases that you can run and win as an independent. Most independents who run in Nova Scotia get a few hundred votes at the most. And so those of us who get elected have to go there with some humility about what people have voted for. Even in my last election, I'm 4 elections in. Anybody who's following politics by this time knows who I am. I'm still aware of the fact that when I'm on the doorstep, what people are attracted to is my leader, my party, and some are now voting for me because I'm better known than I'm used to be. But I'm under no illusion that people are sending me to Province House here in Halifax because they're voting for me regardless. If I'd run for a different party or as an independent, which I think is the real test, there is not the slightest doubt in my mind that I would have been defeated. So there's got to be something more to it than saying that people are just voting for me. So when new members come to the legislature, I have to laugh a little bit when suddenly they fall in love with themselves and their own opinions, and they don't give enough weight to the real reason that most of them are there, which is their leader, their party history, because that's what the voters were voting for. Second reason why I think it's normal and desirable that people should vote with their party most of the time, it's once you get to the legislature or parliament, you find out that modern government is incredibly complex. Again, that's another story for another day about the vast range of subjects that are covered by legislation. Elizabeth says she reads all the legislation. It's crazy, the amount of legislation, the complexity of it. The only sensible way to deal with it is to divide up the work amongst your team, and then you've got to trust your team so that you take responsibility for certain kinds of bills and other people take responsibility for other kind of bills. And you just have to trust your team so that when a bill comes to the floor of the House which you haven't read and somebody on your team says you should vote for this because you may not have read it, you may not understand every part of it, but you still vote for it because it's the only sensible way to divide up the work. If I were sitting in the House as an independent, the reality is I would have to sit out most votes because, frankly, I wouldn't understand most of the legislation that came before the House, which covers an incredible range of topics, some in great depth. Okay, third reason why I think people should normally vote with their party, and this comes out of some international work that I've done that's really struck me, is this could be another intake of breath moment, Stephanie. Political parties help keep politics clean. Okay, and you say,
yeah, that was not my neutral face.
And you say, what is he talking about? Okay, what happened is, and those of us who've been in politics for a while knows this, is that without parties, you'd have a bunch of individuals going out and trying to get the best deal they can for themselves, for their district. And it's just naive to think that most representatives are open to persuasion on purely policy grounds. So party discipline helps keep their hands clean, helps give them some backbone when the going gets tough. And just to give you an example of how this actually works in other countries, in Bangladesh, where I had the opportunity to work within the last year, it is actually written into the Constitution. An elected member of their parliament is not permitted to vote against their party. So not only is it not done, not only is it frowned upon, it is unconstitutional. Why? Because they had a history of people selling their votes, crossing the floor immediately after being elected. Basically, it became let's make a deal after an election. So in the Constitution of Bangladesh, it is forbidden to vote against your own party. Now, we may say that's an extreme, but here you can bet that if we had a bunch of independents in our House, people would be making deals. I will vote for your budget if you pave this road. If you build a hospital over here, I will support that piece of legislation. You vote for me over here, I'll vote for you over there. That's the way it works. So actually, party discipline helps keep the process clean. So those are some of the reasons why I think parties bring a lot to the table. But look, let's be frank, I worry too. I worry, but I'm going to phrase it more as questions than anything else. Why is it that our elected representatives vote together more often than in most of the rest of the world? That all by itself should cause us to wonder and ask questions. Why is it that the best debates happen behind closed doors in a caucus meeting? What is the quality of a democracy where the best debates are not open to the general public? And there are some great debates in party caucuses. Why is it that we've taken what is generally a good idea, which is like-minded people can and should work together, and turned it into what the other speakers have talked about, which is everybody must always be on the same script all the time? Why can't there be something a little bit more in the middle? Why have we taken this good idea and taking it too far? Why have our political parties essentially turned into fundraising and election machines rather than vehicles for developing good public policy? Why do we have the system we have of party financing when political party financing is at the root of a lot of corruption around the world? What's the answer to all of these questions? I don't know. I wish I knew. Thank you very much.
Graham Steele.
As a backbench member of Parliament, to what extent do I subject myself to their attempts at
So
control?
what we have is an abomination. You've heard what Brent. I will go
That
farther. and say
however
we-
unsexy democratic renewal is, it's perhaps the most important political issue of our time.